In order to open up a new route, 2 ships ventured into the Arctic Circle. However, amidst the icy winds and fog, the crew members were repeatedly attacked by unknown creatures. The fear in their hearts forced them to flee in disarray. Amidst terrifying roars, a monster had already emerged among them. They were all naval soldiers. 3 months prior, these 2 Royal Navy vessels, representing the most advanced technology at the time, set sail from a northern port, attempting to cross the Arctic Circle and reach a new continent. This would not only open a new route, but also earn them the Emperor's reward. While shortly after venturing deeper, they encountered strange occurrences. The ships passed through a strait, and the ship's compasses started behaving erratically, indicating a sudden movement of the North Pole. Yet, Captain John stated that the North Pole moves several miles every day, which is a normal phenomenon, assuring the sailors not to be concerned, and even celebrate this discovery, as it meant they had entered the interior of the Arctic Circle, and success was within reach. To celebrate this significant breakthrough, that evening, the 2 warships held a celebration banquet, but this celebration resembled more a gathering for the higher-ranking officers, with toasting and revelry. It's a lavish feast, while on the other side was hard black bread, accompanied by unchanging bean soup. Suddenly, a soldier who was dining started spitting blood and convulsed all over, falling backward in the midst of the crowd. These changes directly alarmed the other layer of officers holding the banquet. Dr. Goodsir urgently examined the soldier and discovered a large amount of blood clots in his excrement. The symptoms resembled sepsis, but also had elements of lung disease. As the manifested symptoms were still mild, it was not possible to make an accurate diagnosis. Captain Crozier wanted to conduct further examinations on him, yet Sir John directly rejected this proposal, as he believed that during the voyage, losing a few crew members was very normal, and there was no need to be overly concerned. At that moment, the ship was suddenly struck by an unknown impact. The lookout on the mast was thrown directly into the sea. The freezing cold seawater instantly numbed his body. Even if he managed to float to the surface, he had little strength left. Even though he grabbed the rope thrown by his companions, it was still in vain. In just a matter of seconds, he completely sank in this area of the sea. Just upon entering the Arctic Circle, 2 crew members were lost. This journey to open a new route will be filled with obstacles. Crozier recalled the good life before departure, but he could only continue sailing. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, the soldier who fainted and coughed up blood finally regained consciousness. He was very worried that he might have contracted an infectious disease. In the end, he was dissected, but out of loyalty to Sir John, he still expressed, if it was Sir John's command, he would be willing to sacrifice for it. Hearing these words from the soldier, the doctor comforted him, assuring him that he would surely go to heaven after death, and he would certainly see the new route before them. Hearing the doctor's description of the scene, the soldier also yearned for it. He was still aware that his body was failing. He told the doctor about his post-death arrangements, when suddenly amidst barking, he suddenly saw a man standing by his bedside. The soldier tried hard to see the man's face, but found it to be a twisted face, unable to distinguish the features. The doctor followed the soldier's gaze, but saw nothing. The soldier breathed heavily, shouting desperately, asking them to leave quickly, and then, in extreme terror, he departed for the heavenly realm the doctor had mentioned. Goodsir informed John about the boy's death, but the other party didn't pay much attention to it, only instructing him to perform the dissection at dawn, as if it were a trivial matter, not worth responding to. Dr. Goodsir could only obey the order, and silently left. Due to yesterday's inexplicable collision, the propeller of the Hades ship had a problem. At dawn, the first mate arranged for a soldier to go down and inspect. As the rope was released, the soldier descended beneath the ice. Looking around, after ensuring the surroundings were safe, he began inspecting the propeller. It turned out that a block of floating ice was jamming the tail rotor. He only needed to move it away, but a humanoid shadow approached him from behind. After he cleared the floating ice, he suddenly heard a sound behind him. He turned his head to look, and the shadow was already very close. Seeing this shadow, the soldier was frightened. He hastily pulled the rope, urgently asking to be pulled back on the ship, whether due to fear or the cold. The soldier trembled incessantly. He even drank several sips of strong liquor to slightly calm himself down, but he only reported the damaged condition of the propeller. He didn't mention a word about the shadow. On the other side, on board the Terror, Dr. Goodsir had already begun, performing an autopsy on the soldier who died last night. He covered the face of the deceased with a piece of cloth, then used a saw to open the chest. He removed the liver, and after examination, it was not scurvy. Under the captain's command, Goodsir began dissecting other parts, to observe what disease caused the soldier's death. Suddenly, Crozier received a message from the communications officer, stating that the propeller of the Hades was damaged, reducing its sailing speed by half. Sir John called another meeting to discuss countermeasures, but rather than a discussion, it was more like announcing his own instructions. Captain Crozier suggested abandoning the Hades, navigating along the coast, which would not only save lives, but also allow them to return to their homeland next spring. However, Sir John wanted to achieve the glory of charting new territories. He disregarded the others' opinions, and decided to cross the Arctic directly, reaching their destination directly, and he ordered Crozier's Terror to break the ice ahead, even though the Terror was not suitable for this task. After this, it seemed like a punishment from above for John. How arrogant and self-assured his decision was. Over the course of one night, the temperature in the entire Arctic Circle dropped by 40 degrees, turning the flowing ice into an ice field. The two warships were frozen in the middle of the sea. Now even if they wanted to implement Crozier's plan, it was already too late. John ordered all the crew members to use manual methods to break the ice, to keep the ship moving forward. While this method was extremely inefficient, even with better ice-breaking explosives, the ship could only advance a few kilometers a day. A distance of 300 kilometers was enough to deplete their supplies. At this moment, Sir John remained stubborn, believing that God was with them, and that these difficulties were only temporary. Perhaps the ice would melt in a few days, and they could even hold a celebration to celebrate this unprecedented sight. He failed to notice that the compass on the ship had malfunctioned, spinning wildly. Yet the situation unfolded beyond John's expectations. 8 months later, there was still no sign of the ice melting. Although the soldiers didn't say anything, they were secretly becoming impatient. John also knew they couldn't just sit and wait for death. So, he organized a group of soldiers to act as an exploration team. They set off with full supplies. A few days after their departure, they successfully found a piece of land left behind after the glacier melted. There was a pile of rocks here, a marker left by the local Inuit people. Nevertheless, there were no other signs of people. Goodsir speculated that those people had long escaped. To document their great journey, a few of them wrote their names on paper and placed them in a metal can, and put it into a crevice in the stone marker. When they returned, they found that their sled left behind had been destroyed, and the supplies inside were gone. Such a tremendous force couldn't have been done by humans, so they speculated there might be several bears nearby. Such speculation made them worried. They hastened their pace back to the ship, but as night fell, they could only choose to camp on the spot. Before they could set up the second tent, a glacier storm struck the area. The few of them had to take shelter in the only tent they had. At this moment, someone noticed a bear-like black shadow appeared outside. It seemed that after overturning their sled ship, the bear had stayed with them. It followed the group, but someone suggested turning it into provisions, since they had guns. So each of them took a rifle. Using the lightning flashes in the storm, they searched the surroundings in a fan shape, and suddenly, a soldier spotted a dark figure, and decisively fired, hitting the target accurately. But as they approached, they realized it wasn't a bear at all, but an Inuit father and daughter. The elder had been shot. The girl was speaking loudly, but none of them understood the local language. Goodsir was about to go find the captain to communicate, but when he returned to the camp, he witnessed a horrifying scene. A massive figure resembling a bear swallowed the captain whole. Due to the distance being too great, he couldn't see the monster's face clearly. However, one of its claws was larger than the captain's entire upper body. Witnessing such a horrifying scene, Goodsir let out a sharp cry. After that, the figure seemed to disappear. The remaining few people helped the injured elder and returned to the ship. The Terror. Goodsir immediately prepared for surgery on the wounded, as otherwise, the bullet lodged in his body would gradually compress his heart, ultimately leading to death. Then the girl shouted loudly, pushing everyone aside, resolutely preventing anyone from touching her father. Although Crozier provided an explanation in time, the girl remained unconvinced, continuously guarding him. After some effort, Goodsir could only shake his head. The bullet had penetrated deep into the body, and without surgery, it couldn't be removed. Yet, the elder's physical condition had already deteriorated, and undergoing surgery would undoubtedly result in death. Upon hearing the doctor's response, the girl cried, murmuring about some evil spirit to the elder. She even directly tried to snatch the elder, and requested to move him to the ice field outside, refusing to let him stay in the cabin. The others thought she was under extreme stress, and experiencing a mental breakdown. They intervened to prevent her. At that moment, the elder passed away completely. The others were still unaware of the troubles this would bring them. A few days after the elder's passing, the body was thrown into an ice hole, but got stuck. Several soldiers had to use sticks to push his stubborn body down. Meanwhile, the girl was expelled from the warship. However, she didn't leave. Instead, she went a kilometer away, drew a circle, and began building an ice shelter, determined to guard those people for a long time. Meanwhile, on the Hades, Captain John called another meeting. He wanted to hold a funeral for the deceased captain. Crozier took the opportunity to propose to form an exploration team with sledges, but this time heading south. Their destination was where they came from, to preserve the last hope for the fleet. It was this plan that reminded John of, before their departure, his conversation with the admiral. Although John had prepared enough food for 3 years for this expedition, there was no rescue plan. The admiral reminded him, when in dire straits, these 134 sailors would become cannibalistic monsters. Yet John only believed that the other person was jealous of his abilities and wanted to continue undermining him. He dismissed these concerns with disdain. Now, upon hearing Crozier's proposal, John once again remembered the admiral. He believed Crozier was also jealous of him and rejected his plan. His reason was, he cared about the lives of the 8 soldiers and didn't want them to sacrifice. He mocked Crozier for being jealous of his abilities, unwilling to be just a deputy, appearing to be just a clown, not being able to become someone like him, an outstanding leader. His repeated tolerance of Crozier before had actually led to a sense of provocation. His words were filled with obstinacy and arrogance. After this conversation, Crozier realized Sir John's character. He privately organized a team of 8 members, and decided to take all the responsibility alone, even if it meant being executed by a military court later. After Crozier left the Hades, John went alone to an outpost outside the warship. There, he had companions of the deceased captain. They vowed to kill the savage bear, to console the departed souls. Their hunting method was to catch some mice, slice them open and hang them outside, to lure the bear with the scent of fresh blood. John highly praised this plan, and wanted to take a photo with them as a commemoration. Seeing the captain trust him so much, several soldiers invited John to sit in the tent a little longer, perhaps to have a chance to personally kill the beast. Sir John, in order to maintain his image, agreed to it. However, it was this decision that cost him his life. In the next moment, the top of the tent suddenly collapsed. A soldier was attacked from above. Before anyone could react, the soldier was already dismembered. Witnessing such a gruesome scene, John was instantly terrified. He panicked and fled, shouting for help. The soldiers on the Hades heard the gunshot, and understood it came from the outpost. They immediately dispatched reinforcements. They happened to see John running away, but before they could say anything, a tremendous force dragged Sir John behind the glacier. Amidst the roaring sound, John lost one of his legs, and later, he was dragged into an ice cave, disappearing completely into the sea. The head of the fleet, the captain of the Hades, Sir John thus became history. The eulogy he prepared for the captain was never announced, as it was used for himself. What an irony it was. John's death caused a stir among the crew. They didn't know if they would be next. The soldiers spontaneously mourned him, and mourned their own uncertain future. And because of John's death, Crozier became the fleet's highest commander. He immediately issued orders for the rescue team to depart. First Officer James questioned his ruthlessness. Crozier is now the highest commander. He must do everything possible to ensure the soldiers' survival and escape. At the funeral, Crozier recited John's eulogy. Although deeply moved, in front of the soldiers, he must remain strong, holding back tears and choking, finishing the eulogy. Meanwhile, the girl inside the ice shelter listened to the distant growling. She knew the monster had arrived. With each breath it took, causing a gust of icy wind. Faced with such a situation, the girl was paralyzed with fear, huddled inside the shelter, motionless, until the sounds outside faded away. She crawled out. All she saw was a freshly killed seal. Due to Sir John's sacrifice, Crozier became the fleet's highest commander. Some previously hidden information came to his attention. He learned from his first officer that the fleet's canned provisions had spoiled and decayed. The Terror may be at risk of shattering due to the compression of glaciers. What surprised him even more was that soldiers were attacked on the ship. As it turned out, the monster had come aboard with them, so he immediately gave the order for half of the crew to be armed with rifles, ready for combat at any moment. At the same time, he wanted to personally go out and pursue the creature. Soldier Evans also wanted to join the battle. Crozier kept him by his side, making sure he never left his sight. In this way, the two of them ventured deep into the snowfield. Before long, they heard a roar. They followed the sound. They saw a dark figure on the ground. Crozier rushed forward immediately, leaving Evans behind. When he realized Evans had lost his voice, Crozier fired a warning shot, but it was in vain. At this moment, he realized he was facing not only a beast, but also an intelligent creature. Such an enemy, in the upcoming polar night, would become even more dangerous. Under immense pressure, Crozier could only drown his sorrows in alcohol. James noticed this issue, and originally intended to stop it immediately, but the other party suddenly said he wanted James to command the Hades fleet, as he wasn't in a suitable condition. James was astonished to see the other person behave this way, and could only curse him as an asshole. Since Crozier was unreliable, James had to shoulder Captain John's will. Due to the consecutive deaths of their comrades, panic spread among the crew, but many others were fearless and determined, swearing to avenge their comrades. Hickey was one of these individuals. When he called out the other person's name during a shift change, but received no response, sensing something was wrong, he immediately raised his rifle and approached the person slowly. When he reached the person's side, the figure suddenly collapsed and split into two pieces. In the mist below the ship, there was another figure moving. The creature had never left, and the discovered body was handed over to the ship's doctor. After examining the two severed body parts, it was revealed that the lower half belonged to Evans, and it wasn't torn apart by a beast directly, but rather sliced open. Yet, the shape of the wound was very peculiar, not like a typical blade, more like claw marks. This discovery made everyone present realize that Crozier's judgment was correct. The creature truly possessed considerable intelligence, and James proposed that the creature appeared alongside the Inuit people. Perhaps there is some connection between them, and that girl has been stationed outside for 5 months. They should capture her and interrogate her. Under pressure, Crozier also agreed to this proposal, but he hadn't issued the order yet. Hickey had already brought the girl back, tied up, and without any authorization. He was preparing to execute her in front of everyone. Crozier intervened in time. Although Hickey acted without permission, he did bring back important information. The creature resembled a bear in appearance, but was incredibly large, 3 to 4 times the size of an average brown bear, and had very distinctive eyes. At the time, it was in conversation with the girl, displaying considerable intelligence. Definitely not an ordinary animal. Regarding this last point, several individuals agreed. Although they had brought back intelligence, they had still violated military orders. As a result, they were sentenced to 12 lashes. But Hickey was not satisfied. He believed that what they had done was for the safety of the fleet, and should not be punished. He argued for commendation, resulting in an additional charge against them, disobeying orders. The punishment was increased to 20 lashes. Hearing that their punishment had increased, Hickey became more and more agitated. He even began to criticize Crozier, claiming that everything he had done was disregarding the lives of the soldiers. Faced with such provocation, Crozier increased the punishment to 30 lashes, and imposed the punishment under child punishment law, while making everyone witness the punishment. The so-called child punishment law involves the naked punishment of the person. This is an insult to a soldier. Yet Hickey became a hero in the soldiers' eyes, like Jesus suffering for everyone. Crozier's reputation plummeted. After punishing Hickey, he announced to everyone the dire situation of the Terror being crushed by ice, allowing them to freely leave for the Hades. This was for the soldiers' sake. The Terror was almost empty, with only 10 people willing to stay. On the other side, the Hades, the situation is also not optimistic. Goodsir discovered inexplicable black lines on the crew members' gums, and some crew members started experiencing mild hallucinations. Naturally, these changes caught his attention, but at the same time, James assigned Goodsir the task of taking care of the woman, so he had to temporarily set aside the issue of the black lines. He began studying the Inuit language of the Eskimos. As time passed, the crew's aversion towards the woman grew, and a large number of Terror crew members flooded into the Hades. James wanted to send the woman back to the Terror, but Goodsir hadn't finished compiling the Inuit vocabulary, so he went along to the Terror, accompanied by Goodsir to the Terror. Through a conversation with the lieutenant, he learned about a condition called lead poisoning, which can also cause black lines on the gums, and the ship's water casks were made of lead, but then they realized that lead wouldn't have an effect in liquid, so the problem returned to the initial state. What was causing these symptoms in the soldiers? On the other side of the terror, Crozier and others finally started questioning the girl, even with Goodsir's assistance. Both sides could only understand a small portion of each other's language. Nevertheless, they learned from each other. They were being attacked by an evil spirit, which had not yet attached itself to any shaman, but the girl refused to reveal how to kill it, and she told them not to seek their own deaths. This response completely infuriated Crozier, and he ordered the girl to be expelled. On the other hand, James disagreed, believing they should have more contact with the girl. They had differing opinions. Crozier exerted his authority over James, and James sarcastically remarked that Crozier was now the worst commander, and unworthy of succeeding Captain John. Provoked by James, Crozier punched him, and ordered James' deputy, Thomas, to go out and investigate the conditions on the ice. Crozier then sat down in a chair, mocking James contemptuously, seemingly flaunting his own authority. Mocking the other person, Thomas, who received the orders, put on his warm clothing. As soon as he arrived on the deck, he heard a soldier telling him that someone had been attacked again, and not far away, a tent suddenly collapsed. This sound immediately attracted everyone's attention, and they suspected that the monster had attacked again. Just as everyone aimed the cannons at the tent, a soldier inside the cabin noticed a dark figure flashed by the rear window. He instantly realized the monster was trying to attack from behind, so he loudly informed his comrades outside that the monster was at the stern. Several soldiers immediately turned their guns, while Thomas walked toward the stern, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Before he could get close, a soldier at the stern was suddenly struck by a tremendous force and sent flying. The others quickly opened fire, but throughout the entire incident, they couldn't catch a glimpse of the monster. Thomas immediately dispersed his team members, using himself as bait to lure the monster out. He climbed up the lookout tower, but suddenly felt the mast shaking, and the oil lamp next to him fell off its holder. It was only then he saw that at some point, the monster had climbed up not far below him. Accompanied by the monster's roar, Thomas climbed up the netting again, trying to escape to a higher lookout tower, but the monster pursued closely, climbing up as well, and scratching his leg. However, at that moment, the netting broke, and the monster could only hold onto one side of the mast. Thomas barely clung to the other side, when suddenly, the soldiers below brought the cannon over, but the fog was too thick, making it impossible to see the monster's position. Thomas took out a lighter, and ignited the monster's fur directly, with the flame as a marker. The soldiers below hit the monster with a cannonball, causing the entire top of the mast to break. Both Thomas and the monster fell down. Fortunately, Thomas got entangled in the broken netting, avoiding a life-threatening situation. As for the monster, it fell from several dozen meters in the air. Surprisingly, it survived and escaped the scene. Meanwhile, suspended in the air, Thomas happened to see that the woman took advantage of the chaos and fled the terror. Due to this attack, Crozier was severely frightened and fell ill at this critical moment. He needed to recover and regain his strength, so he temporarily transferred command of the fleet to 3 officers, including James. As for himself, he didn't know when he would be able to stand on the deck again. James, who took over the fleet, first task was to inventory the supplies. Nevertheless, the result was not optimistic. The fleet's food supply was already very limited. If they didn't reduce the ration per crew member, they wouldn't last through the winter. But if they reduced it by 1/5, they still wouldn't make it to the following spring. Now Thomas proposed a 1/4 reduction, but it would only make the crew aware sooner that the food was running out. Once panic set in, the 112 people on board now might end up like the tragedy of the Arctic exploration, resorting to cannibalism. This situation left these officers in a dilemma. So, James's thoughts quietly changed, no longer following John's footsteps, but rather contemplating how to evacuate the crew before food ran out. Before that, they needed to instill confidence in the crew, so James decided to organize a bonfire party for the crew to celebrate the approaching end of the polar night. While preparing the masks, he suddenly noticed that his forehead skin, at some point, had started to ulcerate, and Captain Cochrane on the ship also exhibited mental abnormalities. He began to have incoherent thoughts. Dr. Goodsir, combining their symptoms, and considering the monkey he had fed with canned food for half a year, that suddenly convulsed, and went mad before dying, with its gums turning black. He understood the issue with the ship. The canned food was toxic, which explained why so many soldiers fell ill, due to inadequate canning, resulting in lead contamination in the food, causing symptoms of lead poisoning in everyone. He reported the issue to Crozier, but Crozier merely acknowledged it, and instructed Goodsir that this issue would cause panic among the crew, and it must be kept secret and not disclosed. Then he turned and left, leaving Goodsir standing there. Goodsir didn't expect that Crozier would be so indifferent. On the icy plain at this moment, the woman used seal innards to create a peculiar symbol, kneeling at the center of the pattern, chanting mysterious incantations in her mouth. As the sound spread, icy winds started to blow around, accompanied by occasional growls. This was a ritual involving the evil spirit. The monster appeared before her. The girl used a specially crafted knife to cut off her own tongue, in order to make a pact with the evil spirit. Meanwhile, not far away, the crew members, unaware of the impending danger, were simply celebrating wildly. Crozier, dragging his weakened body, seeing them so relaxed, immediately called for James to halt the celebration, and personally ascended the platform to announce the decision he had contemplated for days. Everyone should abandon the ship, take provisions and proceed south on foot. As he announced his decision, several crew members who were suffering from lead poisoning, already mentally disturbed, ignited the liquor cellar, even setting themselves on fire. The flames quickly engulfed the entire party venue. Everyone rushed desperately towards the exit, while the result was, they were all trapped here. Hickey, who was peeing outside, discovered the tent was on fire, attempted to cut open the tent fabric with a knife, but realized everyone was trapped inside. He shouted loudly for the people inside to move back a bit, but it was of no use, so he had to forcefully cut open the tent, and such an action naturally resulted in the death of a soldier, but it saved more people. After this incident, Hickey established a solid reputation among the crowd. After the fire, a lot of supplies were burned. At this point, they had no choice. Crozier divided the remaining crew members into two groups, each group consisting of 40 people. One group to stay with the ship, the other to proceed south, and Hickey was in the group heading out. He didn't agree with Crozier's plan, so he decided to join forces with a few companions, and leave the group with supplies. As they ventured deeper into the southern ice fields, Hickey's reconnaissance team suddenly discovered some corpses, and immediately informed Crozier. After identification, these bodies on the ice were the search and rescue team members they had sent earlier. They hadn't gone far at all, and were all buried in the glacier. Crozier knew that, if this matter is revealed, it would significantly impact morale, so he demanded the 4 individuals present to strictly keep it a secret, otherwise they would be treated as traitors. After enduring hardships, they finally found a place to rest, but a lieutenant informed Crozier that they had too few armed personnel, and requested to add a few more, providing 6 names. Hickey's name was prominently listed. Crozier heard this name, immediately recalling the repeated violations of military orders by Hickey, thus promptly rejecting the proposal. As night fell, while most people were asleep, a commotion startled Crozier, as a soldier had severe lead poisoning, completely disoriented, demanding Crozier to examine his head, and even seized the firearms of those around him. Just as he was about to shoot, a bullet from behind ended his agonizing life. However, it was this incident that made Goodsir more apprehensive. If they continued to consume the poison cans, everyone would end up like that, and Crozier also realized he had to be honest about something. So he informed a few officers about the toxicity of all the tinned goods, and announced the immediate formation of a hunting party, while arranging search parties to continue exploring southward and eastward, hoping to find the local Inuit tribe and seek some assistance. While the officers were discussing strategies inside a tent at the base, Hickey had already revealed the issue of the poison tinned goods to a few companions, and expressed his own thoughts. If they followed Crozier's approach, even if they caught 3 seals, it would only be enough for everyone to eat for 1 day. But if they took away the supplies, their chances of survival would greatly increase, because even a dog would provide enough food for them for 10 days. As he spoke, he threw out a bag containing the pet dog of a certain captain. Faced with this truth, the group fell silent. Indeed, they all wanted to survive. Knowing that he had successfully convinced a few individuals, Hickey no longer spoke, as he still had to continue with Captain Irving to explore the whereabouts of the Inuit people. After several days of searching, Captain Irving suddenly noticed a moving black dot in the distance, and observed it through binoculars. To his surprise, it was a group of returning Inuit hunters. He immediately ran towards them, hoping to communicate with them, and asked them for some food. The friendly Inuit people immediately offered him some seal meat. As a gesture of reciprocity, Irving gave them his binoculars as a gift. He then asked them to stay put, as he wanted to go back and inform the rest of his team. But he witnessed a strange scene. A shadowy figure was crouched on the ground. Irving thought it was a teammate in distress, and hurriedly approached to investigate. To his surprise, the shadowy figure was Hickey in disguise, and upon seeing the captain approaching, he launched a surprise attack on him, stabbing him multiple times in the chest, killing Irving, and using his gun, killed the waiting Inuit people there, and took some of their food, and upon returning to the camp, reversed the truth, and told everyone that Captain Irving was killed by the Inuit people, and they killed those Inuit people, while Crozier still believed that those people were not a savage race, so he requested to examine Irving's body, and took the Inuit girl to the scene of the incident, to investigate the truth of the matter. During Crozier's absence, a thick fog enveloped the camp. Several of Hickey's accomplices instigated the soldiers in the camp together, convincing them that a large Inuit force was approaching, and if they didn't take up arms to resist, death would be their only fate. As a result, the soldiers seized their weapons, while Crozier had just returned to the outskirts of the camp, and was mistaken for an attacking enemy. A bullet landed near his feet, and he realized that things had spiraled out of control. Crozier could only instruct the girl to leave first, taking a few trusted individuals with him. However, in the camp at this moment, Hickey and his followers had taken control. A real rebellion was unfolding before their eyes. Crozier ordered a search of the camp, ordering everyone below the rank of an officer to disarm, and secretly arrest Hickey, sentencing him to a public hanging, declaring his various crimes. Just as the execution was about to take place, that creature attacked the camp once again. Taking advantage of the chaos, Hickey and his group looted the armory once more, and escaped with the supplies, also kidnapping Dr. Good Sir. Crozier didn't have time to deal with them. The creature was remarkably agile, able to drift and dodge bullets, even artillery shells. It mercilessly slaughtered amidst the crowd. In the end, this attack resulted in nearly half the camp's casualties, leaving only 23 people, many of whom were wounded. But Crozier did not give up on them, and continued to move south with them. Yet, reality was cruel. More wounded soldiers were unable to move, and many soldiers, due to lead poisoning, their bodies had started to decay. Just like James, their bodies riddled with holes. Although Crozier was reluctant to admit it, if things continued like this, they would all die here. However, he was unwilling to abandon anyone, so he decided to abandon the tents and other burdens, and carry on with the wounded. As for those who left with Hickey, they faced even harsher consequences. Those severely poisoned had no value anymore, so Hickey killed them all, and demanded Good Sir to dismember them, turning them into food. As a devout believer, Good Sir struggled internally. If he didn't agree, Hickey would kill his close friend, and he would starve as well. So, to protect his friend, he made a decision against his conscience, to fully dissect a corpse, but the torment in his heart drove him mad. At that moment, his friend offered comforting words. He recounted his experience of being baptized. At the age of 7, Good Sir seemed to have an epiphany. He wanted to atone for his actions. Meanwhile, Hickey noticed that the temperature was rising, and he speculated that the ship should be able to sail now. He had had enough of walking like this, so he wanted to return to the ship, but they were now rebels. If they want to go back, they needed a key person, Captain Crozier. So Hickey instructed his men to contact the spy on Crozier's side, lure him outside the camp, and then surround him with their men. When Crozier saw that Hickey intended to capture him, Crozier also understood that Hickey wanted to use him to return to the ship. Therefore, he gave up futile resistance, and went back to the camp with them. In this place, he encountered Good Sir, who had already found peace within himself. He just entrusted Crozier with a ring to take back to their homeland, and told him to ensure the light within his heart. If necessary, he should eat his own souls, apply poison to his skin, and drink the remaining poison, and finally slit his wrist to die by suicide, to reach the heavenly kingdom within him. And his body became food for Hickey and his group. Crozier held on to his conscience. Under Hickey's threat, he only ate a small portion of his soul, and was forced to continue on with them. As time passed, more and more people became unstable. Good Sir's poison started to take effect. Just at that moment, the monster emerged once again, quickly devouring them. And it was at this moment, Hickey remembered the Inuit ritual, and cut off his own tongue. However, unlike the girl, he was eaten directly by the monster that consumed the poisoned bodies. After killing Hickey, It also collapsed and couldn't get up. Hickey's group all perished. Only Crozier was saved by the girl, and managed to survive. On the other side, the camp without their captain had completely broken apart. Some wanted to abandon Crozier and continue southward, while others wanted to rescue the captain, refusing to leave anyone behind. Ultimately, due to disagreements, an internal conflict erupted first, leading to complete destruction. Alone, Crozier chose to stay in the Inuit camp. The film concludes here. The Terror Season 1 premiered in 2018, adapted from the novel of the same name. The series intricately tells the story of a group of people exploring a new passage, and how they go from being confident and optimistic to utterly despairing. The plot is full of twists and turns, with foreshadowing throughout, depicting human nature in vivid detail. The overall convergence of the final clues pushes the series to its climax. In the depths of despair, people resort to cannibalism. Crozier's shining humanity makes it all the more precious. Overall, this is an incredibly worthwhile TV series to watch. If you enjoy my channel, please consider subscribing.